They said the shot was impossible.
2.6 miles. One bullet. One chance. The video went viral in 6 hours. A quiet woman in
Wyoming who made physics bend to her will.
But what they didn't know was why she could make that shot, or what it would cost her when the wrong people started paying attention. The Barrett M107 cracked like thunder across Copper Range,
Echoing of the Wind River Mountains.
but the shot missed wide by 15 feet. Jake Morrison swore under his breath,
His $12,000 rifle suddenly feeling like a toy in his hands. Behind him, his friends shifted uncomfortably, their brand new tactical gear looking more like costumes with each failed attempt.
"Wins impossible today," Jake muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Range must be off." From the porch of the weathered office, Pete Garrison took a slow sip of coffee, his weathered face showing the faint trace of a smile. He'd been running this range for 18 years, and he'd seen this story 100 times. Young men with expensive equipment and cheap discipline.
But Pete wasn't watching Jake anymore. His attention had shifted to lane 12, the farthest one out, where a woman in a faded Air Force cap was braking
Down her rifle with movements so precise, they looked choreographed. Maya Lewis. She came here every Sunday morning, shot for 2 hours, spoke to no one, and left.
Pete had learned not to ask questions.
Some people carried silence like armor, and Maya wore hers like a second skin. "Any snipers here?" Pete's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. The question wasn't loud, but it carried weight that made every shooter on the line pause. Jake turned, half smiling, thinking it was a joke at his expense. The handful of other shooters looked around, uncertain. And then, from the far lane, Maya set down her coffee thermos and stood. "I'll give it a try," she said quietly. Jake's smile widened into something condescending.
"Ma'am, no offense, but we're talking about precision shooting here.
"Long range.
It's pretty technical."
What distance?" Pete interrupted, looking at Maya.
She walked toward the equipment rack, her boots crunching on gravel, her movements unhurried. 2,600 meters.
The range went dead silent. Jake laughed a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's not a shot. That's a fantasy."
You'd need perfect conditions, specialized ammunition, and even then I'll miss," Maya said simply, selecting a Remington 700 from the rack. "But I'd like to try." She inspected the rifle with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times, checking the chamber, examining the crown of the barrel, testing the trigger pull.
Every motion spoke a language Jake's expensive gear couldn't teach him. Dr. Marcus Hale, a semi-retired physician who spent his weekends at the range,
Moved closer, recognition flickering in his eyes.
"Maya, you sure about this?" She didn't answer.
She was already loading a single .338 Lapua Magnum round into the chamber. Pete drove the range truck out toward the distant ridge.
An orange cone strapped in the bed. The small crowd that had
Gathered watched it shrink against
the vast Wyoming landscape until it was barely a speck against the grey-blue mountains.
Maya settled into position behind the rifle, and the transformation was immediate.
The quiet ranch woman disappeared, replaced by something harder, more focused. She adjusted the bipod with millimeter precision, checked the scope level, made microscopic corrections to the rear back.
Dr. Hale set up his spotting scope beside her. "Winds shifting," he murmured.
"Northwest, 10 to 12 miles per hour, but it's not consistent."
Maya's eyes never left her scope,
She was reading the wind herself, watching grass sway to 1,000 meters away.
noting how dust drifted, observing the slight correction a hawk made mid-flight.
She was calculating variables that most shooters never even considered.
"Elevation," someone whispered.
6,000 feet, Dr. Hale replied softly.
"Air's thinner."
"Bullet will fly different than sea level." Jake stood at the edge of the growing crowd.
His earlier arrogance fading into genuine curiosity. He'd spent thousands on equipment and training.
But watching Maya work was like seeing a different sport entirely. Every adjustment she made was purposeful. There was no wasted motion, no second guessing. She was breathing in a pattern, slow, measured. The kind of breathing that lowered heart rate and steadied nerves. 4 counts in, hold. 6 counts out. Her right hand moved to the trigger, taking up slack until she rested on the edge of resistance. For a moment, she wasn't at Copper Range anymore. Sand, heat, the suffocating weight of desert air pressing down like a physical thing.
Goes to 1. This is Hawkeye. Target coordinates confirmed.
"How copy?" Maya's voice came through the radio, calm as glacier water. "Good copy, Hawkeye."
Target is troops in contact. Danger close. Friendless marked with infrared strobes. 200 meters north. Understood. Ghost. 10 seconds out. She watched through binoculars as the A-10 Thunderbolt descended like a metal angel, its GAU-8 cannon beginning to rotate.
The sound came next, barrage noise that shook the earth and the soul simultaneously.
When the dust cleared, silence.
The kind that followed violence.
The kind that could follow you home across oceans and years.
A voice pulled her back.
Maya. Dr. Hale's tone was gentle.
Whenever you're ready.
She took half a breath and held it.
The world narrowed to the crosshairs.
The orange cone wavering in heat shimmer to 0.6 miles away. She compensated for wind drift. Bullet drop. The Coriolis effect.
Air density. Temperature gradients. Calculations she'd done so many times they'd become instinct.
Her finger pressed.
The rifle backed against her shoulder with familiar force.
The crack of the .338 Lapierre split the cold morning air, echoing across the valley like distant thunder.
Then came the wait.
At that distance, the bullet was in flight for nearly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours.
The crowd held its collective breath. Phones rose, recording. Jake leaned forward unconsciously.
Dr. Hale's eye never left the spotting scope.
Impact. The word came out barely above a whisper, filled with disbelief.
Direct hit.
The cones down.
For one suspended moment, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted.
Cheers. Shouts of disbelief.
Someone yelled. Did you see that? Phones went wild.
Jake just stood there, mouth open,
staring at the distant ridge where a small puff of dust was still settling.
Maya opened the bolt, caught the brass casing before it hit the ground, and turned it over in her hand once, a small ritual.
Then she set it down gently, made the rifle safe, and stood.
Jake found his voice.
Who are you? She looked at him with those steady, measuring eyes.
Nothing's impossible if you understand the variables. The celebration was still going strong when the black sedan rolled up the dirt road.
It didn't belong here, too clean, too expensive, too deliberate.
The man who stepped out wore a suit that cost more than most of the rifles on the range.
His smile was practiced, professional, predatory. Hell of a shot, Miss Lewis. Clint Roods. Everyone in Johnson County knew the name.
He worked for Westfield Development Group,
the company that had been quietly buying up land along the river for the past year.
Land that held mineral rights, water rights.
The kind of land that made men in suits very interested.
Maya's expression didn't change, but Pete noticed her shoulders tense slightly. Word travels fast, Rhodes continued,
his eyes cataloguing everything: her rifle, her stance, her reaction. Talent like yours is rare.
Military background, I'm guessing?
Air Force.
She didn't answer. Your grandmother's property borders the new development site, Rhodes said casually, as if discussing the weather.
Beautiful land.
Must be difficult to maintain at her age.
We've made some generous offers.
She's not selling, Maya said flatly. Rhodes smiled wider.
Everything's for sale at the right price.
Miss Lewis, sometimes people just need the right
motivation to see reason. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear.
Louis Vega, a local ranch hand who'd been watching the whole spectacle, moved closer.
Pete set down his coffee cup with deliberate slowness. Dr. Hale's
expression darkened. I think you should leave, Pete said quietly. Rhodes nodded, still smiling. Of course, just wanted to congratulate our local hero. He looked at Maya one more time. I'll be in touch.
The sedan pulled away, leaving a trail of dust that hung in the air like a question mark. That evening, Maya's truck rattled down the familiar dirt road toward home.
The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and violet. The old windmill turned slowly in the cooling air.
Its familiar squeak, a rhythm she'd known her whole life. Her grandmother was on the porch, knitting, when Maya pulled up.
You're late, the old woman said softly. Range took longer than usual.
Her grandmother studied her face,
with eyes that had seen 8 decades of truth and lies. Everything all right?
Maya nodded, but they both knew it wasn't.
Inside, the radio was playing low.
Reports coming
in of a world record shot made by an
unidentified marksman in Johnson County.
Witnesses say. Maya turned it off. On the kitchen table sat a wooden box, one smooth by years of handling. She opened it slowly. Inside was a faded Air Force Patch 70 for TH Fighter Squadron.
Below the unit insignia, one word in thread that had begun to unravel. Ghost, her call sign, her identity for 6 years of war. Beside it lay newspaper clippings she'd kept hidden even from herself. Female combat controller directs record. Number of airstrikes Ghost. Credited with saving dozens of lives in Taliban.
Ambush, the woman who talked to the sky. And beneath those, the one she wished she could forget. Civilian casualties in Helmand.
Province under investigation. Airstrike controversy continues.
Decorated airmen quietly discharged.
Her grandmother moved to stand beside her, one weathered hand on Maya's shoulder.
Those men who came today, the old woman said quietly. They're not going to stop, are they?
No, Maya said.
They're not.
Then what are you going to do? Maya looked at the patch, at the word ghost,
at the life she'd tried to leave behind.
The next morning, Maya found the first sign. Her grandmother's fence had been cut, not broken, cut. Clean, deliberate. 30 head of cattle had wandered onto the county road during the night. By the time Maya rounded them up, she'd lost 4 hours and $200 in penalties from the county. Day 3. The well pump failed. When Lewis came to help repair it, he found sand in the motor. Sabotage, not malfunction. Day 5. A fire started in the south pasture. Small, contained, but the message was clear. Pete called her on day 6. Maya, you need to see this. She drove to Copper Range to find Clint Rhodes waiting in the parking lot. Arms crossed. That same professional smile on his face. Terrible luck you've been having, he said. Old properties are so difficult to maintain. Accidents waiting to happen. Get off this property, Pete growled. Rhodes ignored him, focusing on Maya. My employers are prepared to offer $850,000 for your grandmother's land. That's well above market value. More than fair. We're not selling. Miss Lewis, be reasonable. You're one woman trying to run a failing ranch. Your grandmother's medical bills alone. How do you know about her medical bills? Maya's voice went dangerously quiet. Rhodes shrugged. Public records. We do our research. The point is, you're fighting a losing battle. Take the money. Start somewhere new. Somewhere safer. Dr. Hale's truck pulled in at that moment, followed by Lewis beat up Ford. Both men climbed out, positioning themselves beside Maya. Rhodes looked at them with amusement. Gentlemen, this is a business discussion. No, Dr. Hale said calmly. This is harassment, and it's time for you to leave. For the first time, Rhodes's smile faltered. He looked at Maya one more time. You have until the end of the month to reconsider. After that, things might get complicated. He drove away, leaving them standing in the Wyoming wind. That night, Maya's kitchen became a war room. Pete spread a survey map across the table. They're pushing on 5 properties along the river. 2 have already sold. 1 family's about to cave medical debt. Same story. That leaves you and the Mackenzie Ranch. What do they want with the land? Lewis asked. Dr. Hale tapped the map. Water rights. The river feeds the whole valley. Control the water. Control the development. But there's something else. He pulled out his laptop, showing them geological surveys. There are rare earth minerals in those hills. Small deposits, but valuable. Very valuable. Maya studied the map, her mind working through scenarios like she used to work through tactical problems. They're not going to stop. Pressure will get worse. So what do we do? Pete asked. She looked at each of them. Pete, who'd become more than just a range owner. Lewis, who'd grown up on land next to hers. Dr. Hale, who'd served in Vietnam and recognized the look of someone who'd seen combat. We document everything, she said. Every incident, every threat, every piece of evidence. We go to the county sheriff, the state police, the press if we have to. And if that doesn't work? Lewis asked quietly. Maya's hand drifted unconsciously to the one patch in her pocket. Then we remind them why you don't corner a ghost. The confrontation came 2 weeks later. Maya was working in the barn when she heard the trucks, 3 of them, rolling up the dirt road with the casual arrogance of people who thought they owned the place. Rhodes stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by 2 men who were clearly not lawyers. Miss Lewis, we need to talk. Get off my property. Your property? Rhodes pulled out a sheaf of papers. Funny thing about property taxes. When they go unpaid for long enough, the county has options. And we've just purchased your tax lien. Maya's blood went cold. That's not possible. We're current. There was an error in processing. Unfortunate clerical mistake. By the time it's sorted out, you'll owe us nearly $40,000 in back taxes and penalties. Or, he smiled, you could sell today. We'll forgive the debt. And you'll still walk away with $500,000. One of the men with Rhodes rested his hand on the truck bed, fingers drumming near a coil of rope. The threat was clear. Maya looked at the 3 men, at the trucks blocking her drive, at the documents that might or might not be legal, and she smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I made a phone call yesterday, she said quietly, to an old friend, Colonel Rebecca Santos, 24th Special Operations Wing. She was very interested to hear about harassment of a decorated veteran. She's forwarded your company's activities to the FBI's Public Corruption Unit. Rhodes's expression flickered. I also spoke with Tom Churn at the Wyoming Tribune. Turns out he's very interested in stories about corporate land grabs and suspicious fires. He'll be here tomorrow with a photographer. You're bluffing, Rhodes said, but his voice had lost its confidence. And one more thing. Maya pulled out her phone, turning it to show a recording app. The red dot blinked steadily. I've been recording this conversation. Extortion, fraud, conspiracy. Would you like to continue? The 2 men with Rhodes shifted uncomfortably. Rhodes's face had gone pale. You've made a serious mistake,
he said quietly.
No, Maya replied, her voice carrying the weight of every coordinated airstrike she'd ever called, every life or death decision she'd made in the dust and heat of war. You did. You thought I was just a woman on a ranch. You didn't do your research. You didn't ask who I was before I came home.
She took a step forward, and somehow,
despite being outnumbered and outsized, Rhodes stepped back.
My call sign was Ghost, she said softly.
I coordinated over 200 combat missions.
I've called danger close airstrikes with friendless 50 meters from the target.
I've made decisions in seconds that men like you couldn't make in a lifetime.
And you thought you could threaten my family?
The silence that followed was absolute.
Get off my land. They left fast.
The investigation took 3 months.
Westville Development Group's aggressive land acquisition tactics had crossed too many lines.
The FBI found evidence of fraud, bribery, and intimidation across the counties. Clint Rhodes turned state's evidence to save himself, exposing a network of corruption
that reached into the county, assessor's office and beyond. The story made national news, not because of corporate
malfeasance that was sadly common, but because of the woman who'd stopped it.
Ghost returns. Decorated veteran protects Wyoming community. The sniper who saved a valley.
Record-breaking shot draws attention to land grab scheme.
Maya hated every second of the attention.
6 months after that first shot at Copper Range,
Maya stood on her porch watching the sun set behind the mountains.
The ranch was still here. Her grandmother was still knitting in her rocker.
The cattle grazed peacefully in the south pasture.
Pete's truck pulled up, followed by Dr. Hale's sedan and Louis Ford.
Heard you were having a barbecue, Pete called out.
Did I say that?
Maya smiled despite herself. Nope, but we brought steaks anyway. They gathered on the porch as stars began to emerge.
Louis told a joke that wasn't funny,
but made them laugh anyway. Dr. Hale shared stories from his Navy days.
Pete complained about young shooters with too much money and too little sense. And Maya, for the first time in years,
felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace.
A year later, Copper Range added a new feature. A military veterans free shooting day.
First Sunday of every month. Maya showed up early on the inaugural morning,
finding a small crowd already waiting. Some were older, Vietnam-era veterans with weathered faces and steady hands. Others were younger, back from Iraq and Afghanistan,
with shadows in their
eyes that she recognized all too well.
She didn't make speeches.
She didn't need to.
Instead, she set up at her usual lane,
loaded her grandfather's rifle, and began to shoot.
One by one, the other veterans joined her. The sound of gunfire rolled across the valley, not the sound of war, but of healing.
Of people who'd carried violence learning to make peace with it. And if you visited Copper Range on those Sunday mornings, you might catch a glimpse of a quiet woman in a faded Air Force cap, teaching the next generation of warriors how to find stillness in the chaos. They called her by her first name now, but sometimes, when the wind was right and the mountains called the light just so,
you could almost hear the whisper of her old call sign carrying across the valley.
Ghost. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because sometimes, the quietest voices carry the loudest truths. And sometimes,
the most powerful weapon isn't the one in your hands, it's the one in your heart.
Fade out on the Wyoming sunset. The sound of a single rifle shot echoing across the mountains.